everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. We are really excited today because we have a special bonus episode for you all. We are talking about a movie from 2015 that was new to me. I kind of put feelers out. Does anyone want to talk about rom-coms? Does anyone want to? We're talking about a little movie called Man Up. And so this might be a little bit more of a mature podcast for this is an R-rated film. So if that's not your jam, we got tons of other stuff to listen to. But we'll still try to keep it pretty family friendly in talking about the movie. We're talking about Man Up, and I have a special guest with me. I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and today we have podcaster Betsy Gorham with us, and she is the host of Never Seen It. And thanks so much for coming on and talk with us, Betsy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So this is your first time on the show. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about you and then what you do on your podcast.
Yeah, so I'm based in South Dakota. So when we were
Nice.
coordinating this, I had to make sure what the heck time zone each of us was in because it always makes for interesting timing trying to get synced up with people.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, we've been doing the podcast for 3 years. It's Never Seen It with Betsy and Trent. So it's me and my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And the focus of the podcast is we literally just have one rule. The movie has to be new to one of us. So
Okay.
sometimes it's new to me, sometimes it's new to him, sometimes it's a movie neither of us has seen. We do a little intro, like what are our perceptions? What do we think we know about this movie? Sometimes we know an extremely large amount. Sometimes we have absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
So we do a little intro, go watch the movie, take a break, come back, talk about the movie. And sometimes it's like 30 minutes because we're like, what did we just watch? I have no words. I'm so amazed that I'm stunned to silence. Other times it's like, hello, we're going to talk for 2 hours because we have so many thoughts and feelings. And we cover kind of everything because there are just so many blind spots that we have when it comes to movies.
Mm-hmm.
So we've watched classics, we've watched Westerns, we're working on cult classics right now, all from the 90s. We just finished up a series of stripper movies. And before that, it was the Oscar Best Picture nominees. So it really just depends what tickles our fancy at that particular moment. But yeah, we have a lot of fun doing it. And we just celebrated three years.
Nice.
We're coming up on our 300th episode in a few weeks. We started a Patreon this year, so that's been pretty new. And you'll appreciate this because we actually have an entire show in the Patreon dedicated to romance and rom-coms. And I'm subjecting my husband, who does not care for rom-coms, to all sorts of romance. So it's not going to be necessarily just rom-coms, but so far I've made him watch what did we do? We did Crazy Stupid Love.
Okay.
We did Dirty Dancing, and then Leap Year. And he had feelings about Leap Year. So we're running the gambit, but we're having a good time. And yeah, we're
now are the romance ones those also ones you haven't seen, or or not always?
Those
for the patrons.
The stuff on the Patreon is mostly more of an excuse for us to actually talk about movies that we have seen. So sometimes it's things that are new to both of us. Sometimes it's one or the other. So sometimes the rules still apply. In the case of the rom-com stuff, it's mostly me subjecting my husband. Like, I know what's coming and I know how he's going to feel about it. And that's what makes it fun because he is by nature kind of a cynical guy and I am way more the romantic. So it's sometimes I will treat him. I will say, okay, I'm going to give you a softball. I'll give you one that I know you'll enjoy. But like Crazy Stupid Love, we did that one for the first one because that was the movie we saw on our first date. So it had significance for us.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that movie has some dude energy to it. I think you would like it. And obviously Man Up, it does as well.
He has not seen Man Up yet.
Oh, he hasn't.
Because this one is near and dear to me. I'm scared because I don't want him to see it and then hate it. It's one of those movies for me. So when you were like, hey, let's talk about rom-coms, I was like, I have got the one for you. This is the one I have been preaching about.
In the 2010s, The rom-com was kind of overtaken by a lot of masculine energy, your Judd Apatow's, things like Trainwreck and Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and things like that, which there's nothing wrong with those. But I would say out of that brand of rom-com that we got for a while, I would say this Man Up is definitely one of the more is more appealing for me. So I think it's a good choice. It's sometimes not my favorite. The I'm a Hallmark girl, so I'm like the other end of the like spectrum, and sometimes, but yeah, I think that it did actually end up being a pretty sweet movie for one of these sort of more raunchy, a little more, dude.
It's definitely an R-rated movie.
Yeah.
It's also very British, which I think
Yeah.
contributes to that R rating. Like things that we consider like, oh my gosh, I'm an uptight American and it's so risque. The Brits are just like swearing and living their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's such a cool thing that you all do on your podcast, because I have something similar on my blog. Every month I do since 2016, I've done a blind spot pick, and I try to like
Fabulous.
shake it up, and sometimes I'll do like a cult classic, sometimes do a blockbuster hit, sometimes do like critical darling, things like that, so that it's not boring for me or the readers. But this year, the first year that I was talking about it with my friend Manda, I'm almost at my 100th of these blind spots, which is crazy. But I was talking about it with my friend Manda, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds so fun. I would love to do that." And I was like, "Well, do you want it? Let's add a podcast component, And so we've done just January, February, and March. We've done a little podcast episode to go along with my entry, and so we just to show you the variety. We had the first in January was JFK.
We were literally just talking about that like an hour ago.
Oh, really? Excellent movie. I really liked it a lot. It's long, but it is gripping.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really builds the case and the mystery, and it's pretty convincing by the end. Yeah. So I really liked that. And then we did Love Story, because I was trying to pick a romance in that one's, was so popular. It made so much money. And we weren't big fans of it.
I have seen that one once, but I also watched it when I think I was like 17.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really have the same appreciation for cinema that I do now. Like I was getting there, I was tiptoeing into it.
But I don't know if that would make you more appreciative of it or less appreciative of it.
It's one of those where I'm like, what if I watched it now? Would I hate it more, or would I enjoy it? So
yeah,
maybe someday I'll come back to it. But I was like you, where I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. And then this month we did John Wick, which we had to see, and so that's like a big blind spot for me. I'd never seen John Wick. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! See, I love finding people that just missed something like that, because I get to see like their immediate reaction. And that's the whole joy of our podcast is it's sometimes stuff where you're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
like,
I'll have to send you the link.
Last year we saw Rocky for the first time.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. When like blind spots, if you want to talk about that. But I'm so glad you watched John Wick.
The biggest problem that I guess the hardest ones to reach me that in this whole series, they've definitely been like 80s comedies. I've very rarely liked any of them. I didn't like Beverly Hills Cop. I didn't like National Lampoons. I didn't like Slapshot. I didn't like
there's a brand. There's an absolute brand that was going through the 80s, like what you were talking about with the 2010s bromance kind of stuff.
Lethal Weapon, I didn't like. It was just
a lot of buddy cops, a lot of raunchy humor. Yeah, I'll have to think about that and see if there's one that you might enjoy. But my guess is if you're pretty consistently like, no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I like, I guess I like some from the, like I like Harold and Maude. I like Harold and Maude. I like Monty Python. That's going back a little bit further, but yeah, those a lot of those comedies. I don't know, just didn't get it. I didn't like Beverly Hills Troop or whatever that
Oh,
was.
Troop Beverly Hills.
Yeah, I didn't like that. I don't know. I'm just like really hard when it comes to
You just
80s
don't like
comedies.
movies.
I know. I just don't like fun. That's what it comes down to.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcasts, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
Yeah, so this Man Up, it came out in 2015 and it stars Simon Pegg and Lake Bell. And it's directed by Ben Palmer and written by Tess Morris. So it's interesting, it's written by a woman. And a single woman takes the place of a stranger's blind date and finds the perfect man for her. So I guess, do you want to give aside from that little summary, since it's a movie you love, like how can you elaborate on that and just explain to the audience kind of a little bit about what you love about the movie?
Yeah, so this is one of those movies, I can't even exactly remember how I heard about it. I think it's because I subscribed to Entertainment Weekly for like 25 years. They don't print anymore, but
Yeah.
it's one of those like best movies you haven't seen. And it was streaming on like HBO or something a few years ago during, I think, the pandemic era when we all did a lot of things that we
Right.
maybe wouldn't have made a priority in 2020, 21. And I watched it and I was like, this movie is great. And it covers so much ground because it's not your typical pairing. Like it's not like the anyone
Yeah.
but yous of the world where you have
Right.
these young, beautiful people
Yeah.
where we're just like, oh, their lives are so terrible. They're so young and beautiful.
Yeah.
In this movie, you have two unconventionally attractive people. Like they just look like people. Like
Right.
they're not, uggos or something. Like I
Right.
think they're both very attractive people in their own way, but they're
Right.
middle-aged. They are professional people. They have jobs that are like, wow, that's a respectable job.
Mhm.
But they're just kind of messes. They don't know how to date. Like she is so awkward. And Nancy is somebody that at many points in this movie, I relate to on a deep level. Because when we go back to my days of dating, I don't think I was as aggressively awkward as she is at some points in this movie.
Yeah.
But, like doesn't know how to flirt, is kind of scared off of relationships after having
Yeah.
a bad run of relationships. And she gets really cynical. And I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe it's just the humor in this movie that really tickles my funny bone.
Mhm.
But these two have really great chemistry. They're really relatable. And it's that what do they call it? Like a bottle movie.
Mhm.
It takes place in one night. It's like
Yeah.
they meet in the afternoon and it goes to the end. And you get a couple of the cliches along the way. But at the end of the movie, I'm crying. Like
Mhm.
I go through an emotional roller coaster watching this movie.
Well, and they don't keep the lie too long. It's only
No.
about half the movie, and then they kind of move on. And then she kind of has to, we'll explain more about the lie in a second, but then then he kind of wants her to lie, and it kind of goes back and forth, and so it doesn't sort of strain the premise, I don't think, too much.
No,
And you're right, they do feel like relatable people.
Yeah. Most movies like this where there's kind of a high concept premise, it drags out the whole movie. But because it's so brief, it's a blind date gone awry, basically. Right. They get it out of the way pretty quickly. And there's some they skirt the line of it gets pretty silly, but then they pull it back where I'm like, okay, now we're going back to it being a normal, funny date. But these two together have fabulous chemistry. Like when they go and the lie hasn't been revealed yet and they're at a bowling alley, just being a couple of doofuses. Like they are drinking and being silly and having a good time. It's like that is me and my husband when we are really stupid together out in public. That's the kind of stuff we do. And we don't care who's looking at us. Like that's the stuff in this movie I relate to.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely relate to the awkwardness too. I am like the worst when it comes to flirting or anything. Forget it.
Dating's the worst.
I mean, that's why I'm probably still single, because I'm terrible. I'm terrible. You think covering all these Hallmark movies and all this stuff, I would have better game.
Pick up some tricks.
Terrible game. I have terrible game.
Well, I love how they open this movie where she is being set up by her friends on a blind date, and they demonstrate just how bad she is at this.
Yeah.
Like the guy has a photo in his wallet and she's like, oh, busted. You got a photo of your ex in your wallet. And he's like, oh, actually, that's my sister. Oh, I'll bet she gets all the boys. She's dead. Yeah. Oh, this is going so well.
Yeah. It's like, stop. You can feel it go there.
Oh, it's really, really uncomfortable. And then even when she meets up with Simon Pegg and makes the decision she's going to take this guy's date or this woman's date.
Yeah.
It's really uncomfortable for the first few minutes, like the way it is written, and they're both clearly very nervous, and she has the added element of, I have no idea this man's name, I don't know who I'm supposed to be. She's just listening and agreeing with everything he says, and it gets really uncomfortable until they both start drinking and loosen up.
Yeah, so it starts out, there's this engagement party for a friend of hers, right?
Yeah, they don't really explain. It's just one of her friends, and it's a tiki themed engagement party.
Yeah, and so she's avoiding the party because she knows people are gonna try to hook them up. And where for me, as single over 40, I would love my friends to set me up. They're always acting these kind of rom-coms. It's like, oh, leave me alone. I'm like, no, I would love. It's so hard to meet people. It's so hard to and so if my friends were like, here's a person, you might like here, I'd be like, oh, great. I would have no problem with that at all. So if any of my friends are listening, get on it.
Yeah, when I was single, I had a friend who I couldn't go out in this town without running into 4 people she knew. If we were out together.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you should set me up on a date with someone because you know 1,000 people. And she's like, well, I just don't know anybody. I can't think of a single person who you could go on a date with. It's like, I'm not marrying them. It's just a date. You don't know anyone that I might connect with. And it wasn't until I scrounged up a boyfriend for myself that she finally was like, oh, I have somebody. It's like, you are too late, sister.
Too late. Yeah. And it's just so funny because they always act in these movies like that is the most annoying thing. And I would be the opposite.
No.
Be like, oh, yay.
I think they make the point, the real Jessica in this movie, she says, blind dates do work out if the people doing the setup
thoughtful. Yeah.
are actually considering it. Now, in this situation, they really didn't. Tom, the invisible friend who we never met, who was trying to set up Jessica and Jack. That is a terrible pairing. She is the exact opposite of Nancy in every way that Nancy is, 34 and kind of a mess and a cynic and bad at relationships. Jessica is 24 and perky and a triathlete.
It's really true. It makes no sense why I thought that watching it. I'm like, what was he thinking, this friend? Because even just because that's 16 years difference between him and Jessica. That's a lot.
Yeah. If you think back to when you were 24 and then you think about where you are now, like I'm closing in on 40. Like
That's a big difference.
I would never go on a date with some. And no, it's different for us as women because, assuming what we're talking about is dating a man, but I think dating a woman or anybody at this gap would not work.
And I do have some friends that have pretty big gaps in their couplings and they're doing great and God bless them. But so we're just speaking of generalities here, but it wouldn't be the first thing I would think of to set my 24-year-old friend up with my 40-year-old newly divorced on his first date.
Not even newly divorced. Like he signed the papers today. Right. He has them with him.
Right. That seems like a tall ask for a blind date to me.
And I also love the little detail on this about how they never actually say what Jessica does. She works in the city. What do you do? So I hear you work in the city. What's that like? It's wonderful. Care to elaborate on what that means?
That is very Hallmarky, actually, because there's nothing worse than the city for a Hallmark heroine. That's where you go to become corrupted, and you have to go to the small town to remember Christmas and everything that's good and right, and all that. And and so I mean that it's true. I mean we joke on the podcast that you cannot be a good person in the city in a Hallmark movie unless you are running a parade or a window designer. Those are the only two allowed careers.
Everyone else runs a bakery in the small town.
That's right. So every once in a while you'll get like a Miracle on 34th Street kind of plot, like someone's, but business typically is bad. And you have like the bad man of business. And it's so funny because also in Hallmark movies, you usually have like the person for whatever reason is dating this total jerk who only cares about business, usually at the beginning of the movie. Right. And then they dump. And then usually this person is, the ironic thing is that the Hallmark heroine is 9 times out of 10 completely obsessed with business. It just happens to be a Hallmark approved business. So they got to save the bakery, save the farm, save the
Christmas tree
store,
farm.
the Christmas store, whatever. It's like all of her energy is all about business, but it's just in the right packaging. So
and I feel like with this movie, they're maybe aware of this little thing.
I think so.
And they're playing with it because Jessica is the girl who works in the city and they don't elaborate, but she's not like a totally terrible character. She's just she is written to have one element of a personality.
Right.
And it's what saves the day, basically. And then the only other woman who kind of comes into play is his ex-wife.
Right.
And she is the like uptight, woman who had an affair, and she is very flat and mean. So you have those two, and then you have Nancy.
And you have a little bit with her sister.
Yeah,
you see a little bit of, but and so Jessica, she runs into Jessica on the train, and Jessica has this book, 6 Billion People and You,
a self-help inspirational bestseller. And she just overhears Nancy on the phone talking about how her life is terrible and she's just going to let her body seal up forever. All her business. Yeah. And she's like, I couldn't help but overhear, and you should really read this book. But the book is the signifier for how the two people going on the blind date are going to know each other, which is, again, a very silly, like 24-year-old thing to do instead of, why don't we just meet at a bar?
It's like the Pride and Prejudice and Rose, in the perfumery stories that I was doing.
And because she gives up her book, she gives it to Nancy. Nancy's holding the book, and then Nancy and Jack meet, and the rest is history.
Yes.
Embark on a delightful journey with the Romance of Rings series by award-winning author Esther Hatch. Discover a world where sweet historical romance meets laugh-out-loud comedy. The first book, Manor for Sale, Baron Included, is free on Kindle from April 25th to 29th. Grab it so you can enjoy Lord Farnsworth's bumbling attempts at wooing the wealthy new owner of his mother's estate. Don't miss the newest release in the series, There Goes the Groom, which is already being hailed as a new favorite Esther Hatch novel. Find out more on this and all of Esther's books at estherhatch.com. That's ESTHERHATCH.com, or use the affiliate link below.
And so she, for whatever reason, she just decides to go along with it because she thinks she likes him. Why do you think she goes along with it and pretends to be Jessica?
There's a couple of things. First of all, I was actually just reading the trivia about this. The woman who wrote this movie had this happen to her where she was under the clock at Waterloo and some man came up to her asking if she was his blind date. And she said no. But then she had the thought, what if I had said yes? What would have happened? And then she wrote this movie as a result.
And fun.
Again, in that opening sequence, Nancy is explaining all of the reasons why she is the way she is and why she refuses to change. And she has this little book she carries around with her mantras, and her sister makes her recite them. And it's all these things like, put yourself out there. Like the first thing is put yourself out there, get stronger thighs. One of them is be more deviant. Like, I don't know if you caught that one. And then the last one she says before she enters the party is engage with life. This is somebody who has been sitting on the sidelines and letting life just kind of pass her by. And she does the one impulsive thing she's ever done in her entire life because he makes a joke about Silence of the Lambs, because they show her in the hotel.
It's like her favorite movie.
It's like her favorite movie. She's like doing the dialogue with it. And it's enough of a spark that she just decides to go with it. And, it's kind of an insane thing, but also fascinating because you can't tell me no one's ever done this. No one in the world has ever pretended to be someone's blind date.
It's certainly believable enough. There have been way more far-fetched premises for rom-coms out there.
And then they just have kind of a normal evening where they walk along the bank of the river and they get a beer and they make conversation. There's a lot of honesty in what she is saying to him. She just is doing it through the prism of somebody she isn't, and it allows her to be a character, basically.
Yeah.
And it's so much more comfortable for her than being Nancy.
Yeah, and I can see why this movie really spoke to you during the pandemic, especially because you think about a lot of the themes are about going, doing, don't just waiting for life to happen. And I think that was something we all kind of felt. I mean, the year after, I jumped back pretty quickly because since I'm single, I don't have the same sort of risks of people around me. You know what I mean? I could kind of isolate myself pretty. Yeah, my bubble's smaller. And so in 2021, I actually traveled 7 times that year. Because there were all these things that people called it revenge travel. But there were all these people that I was like, I'm going to go visit them. I've always wanted to see them. Always wanted to do that. And even some of it was family, like visiting my sister. I hadn't done that in a couple of years. And it was awesome. It was a wonderful experience. And I think that that was just something that we all kind of learned, is to stop putting off things for another day. Go and do, if it's within your ability, obviously, to do. And that's kind of because he talks about he wishes that he could be a painter, but he's just got some horrible job, and he's just not happy in his life. And
he's still holding on to the relationship that didn't work out.
Yeah.
And trying to move on, but doesn't know how.
Yeah. And she kind of is too. I mean, she had this relationship that didn't work out, and she got dumped, and she just never really gotten her confidence back again. And, he says this is his first real date since the D word.
Dead sister?
Yeah. And then they go bowling.
I
Because
love
Jessica's
this
favorite.
scene
It turns
with
out
them bowling.
Nancy also likes bowling,
She
and
loves bowling.
and it's interesting because when I was younger, I think I probably would have been like, "Ugh, I don't want to go bowling," but you get to a certain point where it's like, it almost doesn't even matter. You're
Yeah.
going out. Who cares? Like, nobody cares that you suck. Nobody cares. Like, it's just getting out of the house. That's the main goal of life. Post-pandemic, certainly.
The funny thing about bowling, this has come up so many times with my husband and I, because his dad worked at a bowling alley.
Oh,
he
really?
fixed the machines for like 30 years. That's what he did. He was a mechanic at a bowling alley. And my husband and I have been together now coming up on 13 years. We have never gone bowling.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know how this has happened, but here we are, and we keep joking about it. And now it's become a thing at this point. We kind of can't. We're like, well, now it'll ruin the mystique if we do that.
Not a lot of bowling alleys there in South Dakota.
I mean, there are several bowling alleys. It's one of those things that, there's still leagues and there's still the group of people that goes every week. Mm-hmm. We have a work outing at my job and we're going to go bowling, in like 3 weeks. So I haven't done it since the last work outing. I'm not good at it, but I like to have fun.
I'm totally random, which means I'm terrible, but like,
yes.
Every once in a while, I'll be like, I just had a great hit there. Great roll, whatever they call it. But yeah, I mean, the part of this movie that didn't really work for me as much was this Sean guy, the bartender guy. I could have used a lot less of him. He was a lot for me.
There's moments where he's funny and there's moments where he's just a weird, creepy creep.
Yeah.
And like I said, I touched on it before, they have this streak of very silly things that happen and they all revolve around Sean for the most part.
Yeah.
And at first it's innocent enough. He's just like, I had a crush on you. And then it escalates to, here, I have this picture of your bedroom from your childhood home that I have in my wallet at all times. And I took it because I was outside your room in a tree. And it's like, is this just like, it's a lot. And he threatens to out her to her date because she's doing really well, but he wants something out of this. So he says, let's make out in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And he's like appears out of nowhere in his underwear to kiss her in the bathroom. And this is where everything gets derailed.
I just think there's no world where I think she would punch him in the face before she would consider giving him a BJ. Like, that's just not, I don't think would ever happen with this character.
I think, again, it's that signal of how bad a spot she's in. Mentally and emotionally, she is willing to do what he wants just to keep this date going. Mm-hmm. And of course, by agreeing to that, she gets busted and she says, no, I'm Nancy.
Yeah.
I'm not. The reason he's calling me Nancy is because I'm not Jessica. I'm Nancy. And then it turns into a big fight because,
why did he even go into the girl's bathroom?
He said, oh, you were gone for a while. I think they needed a reason. I don't think she was gone that long, but I think they just needed some reason to keep the plot going forward. And because we've introduced Sean and now it's become very silly. Yeah. Okay, we're just going to use him as an excuse to get this truth out in the
I almost
open.
wish that she had just like ran into a girlfriend who had been like, hi, Nancy. And then you'd be like, why did she call you Nancy? And then like it all, like, I could have done without Sean, I think, as a whole character. He wasn't my favorite. He's a little annoying to me, but
he's like a lot annoying.
Yeah. But I did think it was so gross when she is flossing her teeth with her hair.
Again, this is like such a mess of a human thing to do. She is like very buzzed in the bathroom, flossing jalapeno out of her teeth with her own hair. And there's people just looking at her. But it's also the mark of once you've hit a certain age, when they say, oh, you just don't care what people think. Like there's truth to that. Like there are certain elements of my life where I'm like, I do not care what other people think. Now, I wouldn't go so I don't have the hair. I don't have the long hair to
Right.
be able to do that. But, would I do it? Yeah, I probably would. In front of other people, maybe not, though.
I don't know. So then, so she tells him the news. He gets upset, but basically, he then says he uses her to help him with this thing with his wife, who's there. He has to give her the divorce papers. The wife is there with her fling, her guy that she had the affair with, and so then and then Nancy is basically says like, you're in the porno land stage of your relationship.
She just improvises. She just really, again, she's kind of playing a character, but the character is herself.
Basically like the honeymoon phase of a relationship, that they're still, when she goes to bed. And then they have this interesting back and forth where like she's very critical of his relationship with his wife, like trying to kind of burst that bubble for him, and he's saying, why did you spend $24,000 on your wedding? And all this stuff. She's trying, because she finds him like crying in the bathroom, and she's like, what's going on? And you're holding on to a feeling. And so she's kind of trying to get him to see it.
That's kind of a great scene between the two of them on the dance floor is, she's telling him, stop holding on to this. You're too romantic. And he's telling her, stop being so cynical. At least I tried. At least I lived my life. You're a coward. And that's where the name of the movie comes in. He says, you've got to man up and do something in your life once in a while. And when they have the scene in the bathroom, she actually feels really bad about making him upset. And he's crying. Like, how many rom-coms do you have a middle-aged man actually like fully crying, like, my life is a mess?
Yeah.
And she says, well, guess what? My life is also a mess. And it's really nice, the thing she says, like, you're a jigsaw and eventually you're going to piece yourself together. Look for the edges and then look for the blue bits.
Right. And she does not need to know the real reason for your tears.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good.
Stop telling your stupid ex-wife everything. Like she doesn't need to be a part of this anymore.
Yeah. And I think that would be, even if it ended kind of poorly, I would think that would be, it would just, I mean, it's really kind of like a death in the family. I mean, that because that person was, I mean, as big as a person can be in your life, and then all of a sudden they're gone. So even I can imagine that even if it wasn't all that positive, it would still just be hard to like stop communicating, kind of. I mean, and a lot of times you have kids, so you have to keep communicating. But I mean, as hard as it is to be single in my 40s, I think it would be even harder to be single again. To like be starting over again. I feel so bad for those people.
And of course, everybody knew his wife was having an affair with this guy, and nobody said a word to him. So now he's got this betrayal to unpack and this loss. And so he's 40 and he's getting back into dating, which is a lot for him to unpack.
Well, it was, I think, a pretty funny scene when the new love guy, I don't know his name, but he catches on fire, and she uses the fire extinguisher.
Well, and to be fair, she kind of accidentally set him on fire. She doesn't want to drink whatever has been served to her in the shot glass, chucks it, blinds him, he puts his arm in a candle, and then she has to put out the fire that she started.
And fire extinguishers, that people don't know, they're really a mess. They're foamy, and so it just gets everywhere, and it's a funny scene. It's a funny scene.
Yeah. Well, and there's again, like, there's moments that they have together in this whole sequence in the bar where they're sort of saying exactly what the other person needs to hear. And at the very end, she says, we're going to do this shot. And after this shot, repeat after me. I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be better. And I'm going to move on. Fuck
Yeah.
the past.
Right, right.
That's what it says in this book.
Well, so he keeps getting all these texts from Jessica at this
Which he doesn't know because they've turned their phones off.
Yeah. And so she's like, what's your theory for this interaction? What are you doing? And he's just like, I don't know. And she's also late for her parents' 40th anniversary party. So there's that. And so she kind of contemplates, should she bring this guy with her to this? And then she'd have a date. But then she ends up parting, and
she gives him a chance, and he kind of fails the test.
Yeah. So she gives him like a quick kiss and then leaves. And he's like, "Are you on Facebook?" She says, "I'm not on Facebook." And I feel like almost 2015 is about as late as you could have. I mean, almost everybody's on some kind of social media at this point. At least one of them.
There's the rare person who's not on something.
Yeah.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
But then, so she goes to the party and her dad gives the speech and says that I'm an empty shell on the beach without you. And that was very sweet.
Yeah, the speech, her parents are great. Like, we don't get a whole lot of her family, but they are a lovely group of people. Like, mom and dad have been together for 40 years, and her brother-in-law asks the question, so what's the secret? And her dad says, oh, put in this many and then just stop caring. And it works. And the two of them are kind of bickering the whole movie, but in this really loving way. And because Nancy's not there to give the speech, you're right. He gets up and he says, I'm a laundry disaster waiting to happen. I am a mess. I would not be good without you here, my wife of 40 years.
It's very sweet. And it's fun to see Dame Harriet Walter as her mom, because a lot of times she plays, villains. She's played a lot of.
She's so sweet in this.
A lot of villains.
Like when her sister's really like, she might miss the party. Do you want me to write a speech? Not really.
Right.
She just very bluntly is like, no, I don't think you'd be good at that. She's the journalist. She's the younger, funny sister. We want her to talk. You be quiet.
Yeah. And she's so good I love her on Ted Lasso. She's great in that, but she's also, of course, in Sense Sensibility.
Yes.
She plays the sister-in-law, Fanny. And and she's just so duplicitous in there. But then we see her, she's crying. And he has her little journal. He ends up with her journal.
They keep swapping books.
Yeah. And so he's like, what should I do? And then he gets the brilliant idea. He's going to go ask Sean for help. And Sean takes him to the wrong address. He ends up this rave, this college rave or whatever.
Dumps him on some street. I do like his line delivery a few points in there where he's like, what's the house number? And he goes, 74, clearly making it up.
Right, yeah.
And then he drives off to the house because he knows where it is and leaves Jack to fend for himself.
Yeah, so he's at this party and he's like, I'm trying to find Nancy Peterson or whatever. And the kid's like, that's my babysitter.
I know where she lives.
But yeah, I mean, Sean is very clingy at this party. He's trying to feed her.
It's just strange. He's a weirdo.
Yeah. And then he shows up. I'm so glad you pretended to be my date today. My day would have been totally rubbish. So might have been the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so yeah, this is a true love match in one day.
Yeah, we get a grand gesture. He runs through the streets with a whole bunch of drunk teenagers to find this house, crawls in through the window, professes that, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have gone to my real date with Jessica. And I
because
want to
that's
give
true.
this a go.
He goes on the date with Jessica, and it's like, what?
And he's like, what am I doing? I have royally screwed this up. And it's just because these two have such good chemistry and he is really committed in this moment. Like everybody in the room, this entire party, he's giving a speech in front of all of her family and friends, and they all go, "Aw," and he says, "Don't make those noises. I am right on the edge." And he's getting emotional. And I cry every single time. I cannot help myself. And it's just nice. It's so, like you said, it's one day. Are they going to end up together forever? The rational part of my brain says maybe not, but also the romantic part of my brain says weirder things have happened. I have a friend, and I kid you not, she was working at a job 15, 16 years ago, saw a guy from across the room, and she called her shot. She said, "I'm going to marry that guy." Guess who's been married for like 16 years now?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think sometimes you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean my aunt and my aunt Nicole had a similar thing where he saw her and he's like, she's the queen. She's the one I'm gonna marry.
That's the one.
And that's it. And they're still married to this day. So,
Well, another thing I relate to in this movie when they're having the scene in the on the dance floor, and he's talking about he had this $20,000 wedding, and he says, "Well, your parents are having their anniversary. They probably had a big thing." She says, "No, they had 6 people at the local register, and then they went out for drinks." That's what my husband and I did, basically. We went to the courthouse. We didn't tell anybody outside our very immediate family.
Right.
I think we had 8 or 9 people there in total. And then we went out to a restaurant. And then the next day we told everybody what we did the day before.
It's like I tell my sister, because she got married over in England during the pandemic because she had to in order to stay there. And I mean, she wanted to get married, and I was like, "You need to have a wedding there now. You have a wedding." And she's like, "Why? I'm fine." I'm like, "No, because then that'll be an excuse. The dad will have to pay for me to go to England." I don't know so stop thinking of yourself. Think about other people.
I want to go to England. Come on.
Don't be so selfish. But yeah, I think especially when you are older, like it just doesn't make sense to like court for a long time when you're like, you know yourself at that point, and you know who you are and what you want. And I don't know. I can't imagine if I were to meet somebody and it was a good fit. I cannot imagine like dating for a long period of time.
Oh yeah,
I think it would be pretty fast.
I think we knew after about 3 months that we were going to get married.
Yeah.
And then we were just over a year when we decided to actually go through with it. And that was 12 whatever years ago.
Yeah. You gotta take the moment,
Yeah.
And so I get it. I really do. This was really fun. This was different than I just had never seen this movie before. So that was fun. Also, like unusual that she is definitely taller than him for sure.
A little bit. She's also wearing boots, which is adding to it. But yeah, I like these two as a couple.
Yeah, I do too.
I think, because they are just kind of normal people. They feel like people you would meet on the street, that you would see on a date together, that they don't do unbelievable rom-com kind of things. They behave in a way that I believe. And because I believe it, I'm more invested in it. But this is one of those movies, like I said, it kind of flew by. It came out, it existed. I don't think it made this giant splash. It's got pretty positive ratings if you go and look at the critics scores for this movie and the audience scores. But every time it bounces around to different streaming platforms, I find people who like these kinds of movies, I'm like, please do yourselves a favor and watch Man Up.
I watched it on Tubi, so it's free. People can watch it for free.
It's on like 4 or 5 different platforms right now that are mostly the free ones.
Yeah.
And it's like a quick 90 minutes. It's super cute.
Yeah.
I watched it twice this week. The first time
it's 80% on RT, 80%.
Yeah. The first time I watched this to prepare for the podcast, and then the second time was I was having a bad day and I needed a comfort movie, and I was like, I'm just gonna do it again.
Gotta love those comfort watches. They're the best.
Literally started to become that for me. Like I get that little itch in the back of my head, like I want to watch Man Up again. Because it makes me feel nice. I get a smile on my face. It's so cute at times. It's really heartwarming at times. There's some really good dialogue that's really relatable. And it's just fun. So I'm always glad when somebody tells me they haven't seen it, because then they get to watch it and experience it.
Well, if you're listening and you have seen this movie, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section or on Twitter. And how do people follow you, your show, everything like that?
Yeah, so you can find me, Gorham_Betsy on Twitter. The podcast is linked on there. It's neverseenit_pod. We're also on Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook. Pretty much if you look up Never Seen It with Betsy and Trent, you're gonna find us.
Okay, good. We'll have that all in the description. You also definitely check it out. And you can follow me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. Also, make sure you're following the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. If you are listening on iTunes to either of our podcasts, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really helps a lot. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group, which is the best way you can support us. And you get weekly exclusive reviews, lots of other fun content. And we have our merch store where you can get I Love Rom-Com shirts, new edition. So check that out. And thanks so much. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.